Virgo, have you felt it? That trembling in the air that seems to echo inside your chest, the quiet, electric knowing that something is coming? Something powerful is approaching you now. Not a sign. Not a coincidence. A force. It's not subtle. It's not delicate. It's not something you need to interpret. It is direct, unstoppable, and impossible to ignore. This week, that energy will move through your life like a divine wind, tearing down every wall you've built around your intuition and your authentic self. The universe is not asking this time, it's insisting. The voice you've silenced for years, the one that whispered truth beneath perfection, will finally rise. Virgo, the healer is being called to heal herself. The perfectionist must now surrender control. The one who gave light to others must remember how to receive it. For too long, you've mistaken calm for peace, silence for wisdom, order for safety. But the universe knows the truth. It's not here to destroy your structure, it's here to reveal your soul. The alignment that approaches you now is not punishment, it is initiation. What's coming is not chaos, it's correction. The very ground beneath you is shifting so you can finally stand where you were always meant to be. Don't resist this transformation. You are not losing control, you are being liberated from the illusion of it. Every storm that's rising in your life is not a warning, it's a cleansing. Every ending is secretly an opening. And every fear that surfaces now is a teacher wearing a mask. You are stepping into a sacred turning point, Virgo, where your intuition becomes undeniable. What you once doubted, you will now know. What you once questioned, you will now feel. The divine order you've been seeking is not around you, it's within you. Remember this, when the walls fall, it's not the end of your sanctuary, it's the beginning of your freedom. The universe is not taking something from you, it's returning you to yourself. So breathe. Open. Let this light move through every forgotten corner of your being. The message has found you because you are ready to hear it. And when this energy arrives, don't hide, don't analyze, don't run. Stand in it. Let it become you. This is your rebirth, Virgo. The prophecy has begun. Before we dive deeper into this message, take a moment to ground your energy and support the flow of this space. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mindfulness Meditation, your channel of light, guidance, and awakening. Every gesture of support helps us bring more messages like this to souls across the world who are ready, just like you, to remember who they truly are. The root of suppression. Why Virgo dimmed their light. There's a moment in every Virgo's life, quiet, almost invisible, when their light begins to dim. Not because they lost faith, not because they stopped believing in goodness, but because they were taught that their brilliance made others uncomfortable. Somewhere between being praised for excellence and scolded for trying too hard, Virgo learned to trade radiance for acceptance. They chose silence over confrontation, modesty over recognition, usefulness over authenticity. And from that moment on, the world applauded their humility, while their soul quietly mourned its own disappearance. They thought humility meant hiding their gifts. They thought peace was found in self-containment. They thought kindness meant never outshining anyone. But Virgo, let's be honest, that wasn't peace. That was suppression wearing the mask of virtue. You learned early that your clarity could be mistaken for criticism. Your intuition, for judgment. Your attention to detail, for control. When you were younger, someone, maybe a parent, a teacher, a friend, told you that you were too much, and the child in you translated it as I must become less. That moment carved an invisible rule into your heart. To be loved, I must be smaller than my truth. And so you mastered the art of subtlety. You became the caretaker, the one who fixes quietly, the one who doesn't need applause. You built a life of grace, but beneath that grace was exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. Yet there's something sacred in the Virgo soul, something that never truly dies, even under layers of control and duty. It's that divine spark of discernment, the ancient wisdom that sees the patterns beneath chaos. You were never meant to dim that light, you were meant to refine it into guidance. When you silence your brilliance, the world loses its healer, because Virgo's light doesn't blind, it clarifies. It doesn't burn, it purifies. But suppression is seductive. It disguises itself as maturity, diplomacy, even holiness. It whispers, stay quiet, stay small, stay safe. And for years, you obeyed. You became the peacekeeper, the perfectionist, the one everyone trusts, but few truly sees. Then one day, life presents you with a mirror, maybe in the form of burnout, or heartbreak, or an identity crisis. And in that mirror, you no longer recognize the person staring back. You see someone polished but tired, wise but muted. That's the moment of spiritual reckoning, when Virgo's soul asks, when did service become self-sacrifice? The truth is, you can't heal what you keep hiding. Your gentleness is not meant to dilute your power. Your humility was never meant to cancel your fire. You were born under Mercury, the messenger between worlds, carrying the gift of sacred analysis, of divine perception. You are meant to interpret truth, not to bury it. So this is where the healing begins, by remembering that shining isn't arrogance. It's alignment. By realizing that love doesn't require shrinking. It requires honesty. By accepting that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of authenticity. Every time you withhold your insight to make others comfortable, you betray the very reason your soul incarnated. You were never meant to blend in, you were meant to bring order to chaos, light to confusion, truth to illusion. Your perfection is not control, it's devotion to clarity. And when Virgo reclaims their radiance, something miraculous happens. The same world that once misunderstood your precision begins to rely on it. The same people who once felt threatened by your strength begin to feel safe in your integrity. Because the truth is, Virgo's light was never meant to dominate, it was meant to guide. You were never too much. You were simply surrounded by people who hadn't yet met enough of themselves. So rise again, not to prove, but to remember. Speak again, not to convince, but to illuminate. Let your light expand until it feels like home. Because you, dear Virgo, were never born to be less. You were born to bring balance to a world that forgot what wholeness looks like. And as you reclaim your light, you'll find that humility was never about shrinking. It was about knowing your power and using it with grace. You did not dim your light out of weakness, you did it out of love. Now, let love be the reason you shine again. The cosmic intervention, the energy that breaks the pattern. There are moments when the universe stops whispering and begins to roar. When synchronicities are no longer subtle nudges, but thunderous calls to awaken. This week, Virgo, the cosmos is not asking politely, it is intervening. The very energy around you refuses to let you stay hidden any longer. It will shake the foundations you've built around comfort, service, and control. It will expose the quiet prisons you've mistaken for peace. Because this is not punishment, it's liberation in disguise. It begins as restlessness. A tension that hums beneath the surface of your routines. Conversations that suddenly feel too small. Roles that once gave you purpose now feel like chains. You'll feel the sacred unease that comes when the soul begins to outgrow its container. And this time, you cannot manage your way through it, you must surrender to it. For Virgo, awakening rarely arrives gently. It arrives as friction, between who you've been and who you can no longer pretend to be. It manifests in strange timing, the sudden confrontation, the job change, the emotional release you didn't plan for. These are not coincidences. They are cosmic architecture, divine precision designed to break the pattern of suppression you've carried for lifetimes. The truth is, the universe is not trying to hurt you. It's trying to unfreeze you. It's shaking the walls of your perfectly organized world so that your spirit can finally breathe again. 4 years, you've maintained balance by self-control. You've served others beautifully, but often at the expense of your own expansion. Now the energy says, no more shrinking, no more silence. You won't need to interpret the signs, they'll be too obvious to ignore. For those born between August 23rd and September 2nd, the energy strikes first in your realm of work and purpose. You will be called to step into leadership, not because you seek it, but because truth demands it. Authority is not about ego for you, it's about stewardship. You will be asked to make hard choices, to hold integrity where others crumble. The world needs your discernment, not your compliance. For those born between September 3rd and September 12th, this wave arrives through the mind. Inspiration will not trickle in, it will flood. You may wake in the night with visions, insights, words, and plans that seem to come from another dimension. The challenge will be grounding them without doubting them. This is your divine transmission, not overthinking. The universe is reactivating your Mercury, your ability to translate heaven into language, intuition into action. And for those born between September 13th and September 22nd, the lesson cuts deep through the heart. You will face the painful recognition of relationships that only survive when you stay small, polite, or accommodating. The cosmic energy will strip away every illusion that equates silence with harmony. You will see where love has been conditional on your compliance, and where it is time to choose your wholeness over false peace. This is not the week for maintaining appearances. It's the week for emerging. Because the cosmos isn't testing you, it's revealing you. If you've been feeling that your old identity no longer fits, you're right. The Virgo archetype itself is evolving. Once the quiet healer and analyst, Virgo is becoming the spiritual architect, the bridge between order and awakening. The world no longer needs your perfection, it needs your presence. It needs your clarity, your discernment, your sacred precision, wielded not to control, but to create. Let the discomfort come. Let the disruptions speak. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of divine realignment. Every door that closes now is saving you from a smaller version of yourself. Every truth that surfaces is a mirror showing you how radiant you've become beneath the dust of duty. The cosmic intervention is the turning point, the moment when Virgo stops analyzing destiny and begins embodying it. You are no longer the servant of order, you are the vessel of divine intelligence. The universe is not against you, it is conspiring to free you from every outdated story that said you had to earn your worth through restraint. So when the signs appear, the conversation, the loss, the sudden clarity, don't resist. Don't negotiate with destiny. Stand still, breathe, and say quietly to yourself, this is not falling apart. This is my awakening in motion. Because once the pattern breaks, Virgo, the light you've dimmed for years will not just return, it will expand. It will turn every wound into wisdom, every ending into sacred alignment. The energy that breaks the pattern is not chaos, it's divine precision. And this week, it's coming for you, not to destroy, but to remind you who you truly are. The test of intuition. When truth screams louder than fear. Virgo, there comes a moment when your mind can no longer drown out the whispers of your soul. That moment is now. You've felt it, haven't you? The sleepless nights, the restlessness that hums beneath your skin, the racing of your heart that seems to beat in rhythm with something you cannot yet name. It's not anxiety, it's awakening. Your intuition, long silenced by reason, duty, and the need to keep the peace, has finally found its voice. And this time, it will not be silenced again. For years, you've made sense of everything through logic. You analyzed, you measured, you explained. You told yourself that intuition was unreliable, that feelings were to be managed, not followed. But lately, your body has been speaking in ways your mind can no longer deny. The unease in your stomach, the tension behind your eyes, the inexplicable pull toward something new, it's not chaos. It's clarity trying to break through. When truth begins to scream louder than fear, it doesn't sound poetic. It sounds like disruption. Like the life you've known starting to crumble at the edges. Yet, beneath the noise, something pure is being born. You will soon see, perhaps painfully, who celebrates your awakening and who retreats from it. There are those who adored your composure, your self-control, your reliability. But their affection was never for you. It was for the version of you they could control. The agreeable, accommodating Virgo who always put peace above truth. The moment you begin to honor your own intuition, their comfort dissolves. Suddenly, your clarity becomes a threat. Your boundaries become attitude. Your truth, disobedience. And here lies the great test of your intuition. Will you stay small to be loved, or will you risk everything to be free? This is not just a spiritual moment, it's a psychological one. For people in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, especially those born under Virgo's star, this is the season when your intuition demands a seat at the table. It's the shift from people-pleasing to self-preserving. From fixing others to understanding yourself. The truth that once frightened you will now become your compass. And yes, it may cost you some relationships, but it will return something far greater, your peace. I've watched many Virgos face this crossroads. They cling to order because it makes them feel safe, but order without authenticity becomes a prison. The universe, in its wisdom, shakes the walls not to punish you, but to set you free. When life begins to feel unstable, it's often because you've outgrown the structure that once protected you. Your intuition is not trying to destroy your peace, it's trying to build you a truer one. The irony, of course, is that intuition has always been your hidden genius. It's why you can read a room without a word spoken, sense tension before it erupts, feel the truth behind someone's smile. But because you've spent so much of your life in service, helping, healing, correcting, you've turned that sensitivity outward instead of inward. Now the balance shifts. The healer must finally listen to her own medicine. You'll notice subtle miracles when you do. Decisions become lighter. Timing becomes precise. The right people appear without effort. That's because intuition isn't mystical. It's memory from the soul, reminding you where you belong. It's your higher intelligence, one that doesn't argue but knows. When you stop fighting it, it begins to guide you home. And yes, truth will scream louder than fear before peace arrives. It must. Because fear has ruled you for too long. Fear of judgment, of loss, of being misunderstood. But every great transformation begins with disobedience to fear. It's how we remember that the divine never intended us to shrink in order to be accepted. So when the shaking begins, when life feels uncertain, when your intuition starts demanding answers, remember this. What's collapsing is not your stability, but your silence. You're not losing control. You are losing illusion. Those who loved your compliance may fade away, but those who love your truth will stay. And as your intuition takes the throne again, you will realize, it was never madness, never overthinking, never too much. It was prophecy all along, your soul trying to speak in a language your logic couldn't yet understand. Breathe. Virgo. The test has begun. But so has your liberation. This is your sacred reminder. They didn't love you because you were easy to control. They loved the peace you gave them at the cost of your own. But now, that era ends. The real you, the intuitive, powerful, unapologetic you, is emerging. And the world is finally ready to meet her. The collapse and rebirth. What must fall apart? There comes a moment in every Virgo's journey when the very structure they built begins to tremble. Not because they did something wrong, but because life, in its infinite wisdom, refuses to let them live small any longer. The walls they built to protect their gentleness begin to crack. The masks they wore to keep the peace begin to feel too heavy. And one by one, the old versions of themselves start to fall away, not as punishment, but as sacred liberation. When Virgo reclaims their power, the world around them must rearrange itself to match that truth. Jobs that once felt meaningful lose their color. Friendships that thrived on imbalance fade into silence. Roles once played with pride start to feel like burdens. It's as if the universe itself is dismantling everything built upon the architecture of self-sacrifice. This is not destruction, it's divine subtraction. Because everything that collapses now was never meant to carry the real you. You see, Virgo's life is often constructed like a cathedral, beautifully ordered, carefully sustained, but sometimes built for others' prayers rather than their own. 4 years, they've been the healer, the reliable one, the quiet pillar holding everyone else's chaos together. But every pillar eventually wearies under the weight of expectation. And this cosmic season doesn't come to hurt Virgo. It comes to free them from the illusion that their worth depends on holding the world upright. So when the ground begins to shake, don't cling. Don't bargain. Don't apologize for evolving. The loss you feel now is not the end, it's the clearing before creation. It's the sacred space where your soul begins to rebuild a life aligned with truth, not obligation. Yes, it will feel lonely. The silence after collapse always does. You'll miss the noise, even if it was the noise that drowned your voice. You'll miss the structure, even if it was the structure that kept you small. But that emptiness is holy. It's the womb of transformation. The loneliness you feel is not absence. It's the beginning of your presence returning to you. Virgo's solitude is never wasted. It's the sacred laboratory where authenticity begins to breathe again. Where clarity becomes louder than approval. Where self-respect takes root in the ashes of old identities. There's something almost ancient in this process, like a ritual of purification practiced by mystics and prophets. In mythology, rebirth always follows collapse. The phoenix does not rise despite the fire, but because of it. In astrology, Virgo's collapse is not chaos, it's precision. The universe is cutting away every false attachment with surgical care, leaving only what is true, clean, and alive. And here's what many forget. Virgo's destruction is never random. It's divinely orchestrated. What falls is only what cannot sustain the next version of you. The job that drains your soul, the relationship that silences your truth, the friendship that survives only on your self-abandonment. These crumble not to break you, but to release you. Because Virgo's rebirth begins in the moment they stop fighting for what was, and start surrendering to what is. In that surrender, something extraordinary awakens, the remembrance of who they were before the world demanded usefulness. Before perfection became armor. Before love turned into performance. They rediscover their original frequency, pure, grounded, and luminous. The real Virgo doesn't need to be needed. They need to be known. So as everything falls apart, remember, this is not a collapse, it's a consecration. The universe is reclaiming the space that was always meant for your soul's expansion. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to be still. It's okay to not know what comes next. Because even in the ruins, something sacred stirs. And soon, the world will see it, the Virgo who no longer hides behind control, who no longer trades authenticity for peace. The Virgo who understands that sometimes, the only way to heal is to let what's dying finally die. From those ashes, you'll rebuild, but this time, not for survival. This time, for truth. Everything that crumbles now was never meant to carry the real you. Let it fall. And then, quietly, watch yourself rise. The cosmic lesson: greatness without apology. There comes a moment in every Virgo's life when silence becomes too heavy to carry. That moment, the shift between who you were and who you were meant to become, is here. It's not a thunderclap from heaven, not a dramatic epiphany. It's a quiet unfolding, like the dawn realizing its own light. You may not have noticed it yet, but your soul is no longer asking permission to exist. It's demanding it. Virgo, you were never created to live in apology for your greatness. You were not designed to shrink so that others could feel comfortable standing next to you. You were made with sacred precision, a cosmic architect, a divine editor of the human story, born to see what others miss and bring order to the unseen chaos of the world. For too long, you mistook that precision for perfectionism, believing your worth came from being right, being helpful, being needed. But the truth is simpler and infinitely more powerful. Your perfection was never about control, it was about creation. You were not sent here to fix, you were sent here to elevate. The difference between those two callings is vast. To fix is to imply brokenness. To elevate is to awaken potential. For decades, you may have believed that your compassion meant carrying the weight of others' wounds. You thought healing required you to dim your own light so theirs could shine brighter. But this is the illusion that ends now. You weren't made to heal others by shrinking, you were made to heal them by shining. There's something sacred about a Virgo who stops apologizing for their excellence. When you stand fully in your truth, you become a mirror through which others see their own untapped brilliance. You show what happens when humility meets purpose, when discipline finally bows to divine trust. You remind the world that greatness is not arrogance when it's aligned with service. It's obedience to divine design. And that, Virgo, is your lesson in this cosmic season, that the universe doesn't bless smallness. It blesses alignment. Your light doesn't threaten the world, it repairs it. When you withhold it, the balance tips toward darkness. So the real question is no longer, who am I to shine? But, who am I not to? I've watched Virgos, especially those entering the later chapters of their lives, reach this crossroad. After years of building, giving, perfecting, there comes a deep hunger for authenticity. Not the curated kind, but the raw, unfiltered presence that no longer needs to prove anything. This is the before and after moment of your journey. Before, muted, invisible, overthinking, endlessly preparing. After, authentic, intuitive, unfiltered, fully alive. Before, the dutiful perfectionist. After, the liberated healer. But let's be honest, stepping into that kind of freedom requires courage. Because for a Virgo, letting go of control can feel like betrayal. Yet every spiritual truth begins with paradox. You must release your grip to finally grasp your purpose. You must stop fixing what was never broken, including yourself. Greatness without apology does not mean loudness. It doesn't mean arrogance. It means walking into a room without dimming your energy to make others comfortable. It means honoring your rhythm, trusting your timing, respecting your own boundaries as acts of sacred self-respect. The world doesn't need another modest martyr, it needs conscious masters of light who know their power and use it with grace. The most radiant people I've met in this lifetime are not the loudest, they're the most aligned. Their strength isn't in how much they control, it's in how deeply they surrender. You can feel their presence before they speak. That's the kind of greatness Virgo was born to embody. Quiet, magnetic, unstoppable. The beauty of this transformation is that it doesn't demand that you become someone else. It asks you to remember who you were before the world told you to be less. To return to the purity of purpose that existed before self-doubt took over. The perfectionist within you is not your enemy. She's simply been misunderstood. Her longing for order was never about fear of failure. It was your soul's way of remembering the harmony you came from. So when life begins to rearrange itself, when people fall away, when your path bends in unexpected directions, don't resist it. That's the universe sculpting you back into alignment. This is your initiation into greatness without apology. Virgo, you are not here to ask for permission anymore. You are here to embody what the divine had in mind when it whispered your name into existence. The age of invisibility is over. Stand where you've always belonged, at the intersection of wisdom and wonder, and let the world see what happens when truth decides to shine. Because you were never meant to blend in with the crowd. You were meant to illuminate it. Liberation through declaration. There comes a moment, Virgo, when silence is no longer sacred, it's suffocating. When humility turns into hiding, and composure becomes a cage. You have spent lifetimes shrinking yourself to fit into rooms too small for your spirit, conversations too shallow for your truth. But now, the universe has drawn a circle around this very moment and whispered, enough. This is not just another week of astrology. This is an initiation, a call to rise, to reclaim, to speak. The heavens themselves seem to bend toward you, aligning every event, every whisper of discomfort, into one clear command. Take your space. Because the world no longer needs your edited version, it needs your entirety. The wild, radiant, complex truth of who you are when you stop apologizing for existing too loudly, loving too deeply, knowing too much. This is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's about remembering that your light does not diminish anyone else's. It simply reveals what has always been hidden. So tonight, as you watch this, you are invited to join in something that's not just engagement, it's invocation. In the comments, write the words that will echo through your own subconscious, reshaping your reality one declaration at a time. I deserve to take my space unapologetically. It seems simple, doesn't it? Just a sentence. But words are spells, Virgo. And this one is an act of rebellion against every belief that ever told you had to earn your worth. Every time you type it, every time you whisper it, you fracture an old pattern. The pattern of shrinking, of self-erasure, of apologizing for your own brilliance. This digital space, this comment section, becomes more than community. It becomes a field of resonance, a ripple of awakening shared across souls who've carried the same quiet burden. Together, your voices form a constellation of healing, proof that even from behind screens and miles apart, liberation can be collective. Because when one Virgo rises, the vibration of all rises with them. You were never meant to be background music in someone else's story. You were written as the melody, intricate, precise, and unforgettable. The same discipline that once chained you to perfection is now being reprogrammed into devotion to truth. The same empathy that once drained you will become your compass for purpose. But make no mistake, liberation begins with declaration. History itself has proven this. Revolutions begin not with weapons, but with words. The cry of freedom always starts with the human voice daring to say, no more. And this, Virgo, is your revolution. Your quiet but seismic return to yourself. You've analyzed the patterns long enough. You've healed others long enough. You've waited for permission long enough. The universe is no longer negotiating with your fear. It's already rearranged the stars in your favor. All it asks is that you show up, not as the polished, perfected version of yourself that the world applauds, but as the whole, luminous, uncontainable truth of who you are. And yes, it will shake things. People who benefited from your silence may resist your voice. Those who loved your compliance may misunderstand your clarity. But that's the cost of evolution, and you, of all signs, know that true growth is never painless. Still, beyond that discomfort lies something holy. Peace that doesn't depend on approval, love that doesn't require editing, belonging that doesn't demand shrinking. So as this message closes, pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. Feel the pulse of your own life returning to you. The cosmic call has been made. The portal is open. The permission has already been granted. Now, all that remains is your answer, your declaration. Type it. Speak it. Believe it. I deserve to take my space unapologetically. Because the universe isn't waiting for a perfect version of you. It's waiting for the real one, radiant, honest, and finally free. And when you show up as that self, The path before you will not just unfold, it will recognize you. You did not arrive here by accident. Your soul brought you here, precisely at the right moment, at the exact vibration where truth can finally meet your courage. The same force that once shook you, that stripped away your old certainties, was never meant to destroy you. It came to release you. What once felt like loss was always a preparation for awakening. Virgo, this is where the circle closes, not in an ending, but in a reunion. The battle between who you are and who you thought you had to be is over. You no longer have to hide to be loved. You no longer need to shrink so that others can feel safe. The universe has watched you carry too much, apologize too often, and silence your brilliance for too long. Now it asks you to rise, not as the servant of perfection, but as the vessel of light you were born to be. When you allow yourself to shine, you'll discover your brilliance doesn't overshadow, it illuminates. It shows others that it's possible to live without guilt for being gifted, without shame for being sensitive, without fear of being seen. Your light was never meant to compete, it was meant to heal. Every breath you take now is a declaration that you choose truth over disguise, presence over performance, and love over fear. The universe has prepared everything for your success, but it has set one sacred condition. You must appear as you truly are. No masks, no false humility, no edited version of your soul. The door before you will only open for authenticity. And when it does, you will step through not as the Virgo who doubted, but as the Virgo who remembers, calm, radiant, grounded in divine purpose. Your intuition knows you're ready. Your heart knows you're tired of hiding. So breathe. Stand tall. Let the silence after this video become your altar, where you promise yourself to never dim again. Because the truth is simple and holy. You were never broken, only buried. And now, as the light returns, you rise, not to seek love, but to become it. This is your moment of emergence. This is your homecoming. And the world has been waiting for your return.